All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're ready for our next HED talk. We're here with Martin Dugiamas from Moodle. I think this is an incredible open introduction for us to really dive in with you on EdTech infrastructure for a long-term future. Martin, when I read your bio, I feel like I only need a sentence. Martin Dugiamas is the founder and CEO of the open source platform Moodle. For us to be here with you is such an honor because all of us know your work, and we're so grateful for your work and focus on how research and opening up technology can support teaching and learning and helping to produce a generation that can meet the UN SDGs. Your work is really inspiring. We're so welcoming you for your HED talk here at the World Higher Education Conference. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Wesley, and hello, everyone. I'm having a fun time here at this UNESCO conference. I feel like I'm with my people. There's a lot of people here who believe in the same things and a lot of parallel stuff going on. So it's really good to see everybody's take, and I think we're going to have a lot of collaboration come out of this. But I want to show you what I've been thinking about lately. Firstly, if you don't know Moodle, just a little bit of background. Moodle is an open source project that is used all around the world and has thousands of collaborators. And there's a whole lot of things that we make as a group. There's the Moodle LMS that everybody knows. There's apps that go with that. These are all open source, completely free. We have a Moodle Workplace for Workplace. We have a Moodle Academy where you can come and learn for free about anything about online teaching and get certified. We have Moodle Cloud with very easy hosting. And MoodleNet, which is a new thing for curating open education resources, another open source project that we have. And if you haven't seen Moodle lately, this is what it looks like. It's a new version that we've been working on in the last 2 years. It is a very large community, and over the past 20 years that we've been working on Moodle, we've used all around the world by higher education, by K-12, by individual teachers, companies, the military, everything. And some of the largest users are very large, 3.5 million students in one institution in China, for example. Lots of range. And if you look in the higher education space, it's most universities in the world, a good 2/3 of universities in the world use Moodle in some way. Especially amongst all the UNESCO countries. Mm-hmm. So this is something I've been working with for 20 years, and as I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at what's going on, and how Moodle interacts with the wider technology, I've been thinking a lot about what is the next stage, what is the next level for all this stuff. And that's what I want to present and talk about today in some detail. I do want to preface that by saying education technology is not the answer to everything. There is the higher education problem that lots of people are talking about here at this conference and generally. And then there's the wider technology problem, which is very wide and covers every aspect of life. And I'm just going to focus on the education technology part, which necessarily is the intersection, but is enough to talk about today. So let's talk about 2030 and beyond. What sort of an education platform can we imagine that we could work towards, looking at the trends of today, that would be the perfect solution for the human species on this planet, which is a tiny planet, as we know. So let's look at some of the trends. One of the trends is wearables. Technology is getting smaller, it's breaking into specialized pieces, it's going into our ears, it's on our wrists, it's going onto our faces. Virtual reality is something I've been following since I had my first VR headset was in 1996, and a VFX1, and I've been waiting for it to catch up. It's only now that it's sort of starting to become a more realistic thing. But this is another pair of glasses, AR glasses, that is around and you can buy, and they're rapidly getting down to something you would wear all the time. And when you look at rumors of a big company like Apple, the 6th biggest company in the world, doubling down on AR and releasing these things publicly. You get Facebook changing to Meta and so on. It's very clear that that's going to be a big part of how we experience the digital world going forwards. The graphics don't have to be spectacular. It can be quite basic and it still works really well. You can imagine the digital world overlaid on top of your real world, something like this. This is a sort of how someone in shopping and a shopping mall might imagine AR to be working. But there's many, many ways to imagine how the digital world will be overlaid, particularly when this is the level of graphics possible on today's consumer hardware. In real time, you have completely realistic graphics, which really blurs the distinction between what is the real world we are educating people about and what is the virtual world. But we're not, it might sound fantastic, but it's not that strange, right? We are all looking at pieces of glass most of our day, and we are in the virtual world a lot of it. It's just that it's going to become very much part of our experience. Let's look at game technology for a little bit, which really pushes the boundaries of technology. Some of these big games are production teams of 2,000 plus people producing very, very complex experiences. And something I've been noticing when researching them is the amount of education that they do and education solutions they come up with, because you never read a manual for a game. You never have to learn the game first and then play it. You learn as you go. And those kind of little education solutions and the way they do skill trees and pathways, very powerful and very motivational as people love playing games. These are lessons we can take into all sorts of education. And I also want to talk about AI as a massive trend, of course, but maybe slightly different from the previous speaker. So OpenAI is one group that's working on AI. There are many others too, like DeepMind at Google and others. Here's a very quick example of how AI is working today. This is a website that uses GPT-3 to help you write an article. So you type in the title of your article. It suggests some better titles straight away. It goes, this is a bit more clickbaity for your article. So you pick one of those. And then it says, here's your first paragraph for that article. And you pick from a bunch of first paragraphs. And then it says, here's a structure for that article. And so you pick, I like this structure. So in my example here, the article is called Teaching in 2030, What's in Store for the Future. So I've chosen probably, I think, the third one. And then the next stage is it says, okay, do you want to tweak those headings of your article, the sections, and then write the article. You click it and you get an article. So this whole process worked, you wrote an article in like less than a minute. And that can be in any language, on any topic, and you cannot tell that a human being didn't write that article. Which is scary if you think about how much of assessment at higher education is based on assignments and essays and projects that you have to write. This will pass any plagiarism detection system. It is a completely original article that's been written by an AI, right? So that alone gives you pause for thought on how we assess creativity and thinking, critical thinking. Let's look at another example. Same algorithm, different application. I asked this algorithm to write a poem about a confused raccoon in a computer programming class. This is not something you're likely to find on the web that already exists, right? So here's the poem. I sit in my chair and I stare at the screen. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. I'm just a raccoon in a computer programming class. The teacher is talking and I'm just nodding. I don't understand a single word, but I'm just a raccoon in a computer programming class. I don't know why I'm here, but I'm just going along with the flow. I'm just a raccoon in a computer programming class. Now that's a pretty funny little poem. That's written by a machine in a quarter of a second. Now, say you want to look at how that raccoon looks. The same algorithm, different version, this is the same AI, can generate a photo of that confused raccoon in a computer programming class. Here are some other images from the same algorithm. It's called DOL-E2. It's an illustration of Elon Musk checking Twitter in a cubist style. Academic researchers before a deadline in the style of Edvard Munch. That's the artist who made The Scream, right? That famous painting. A squirrel dressed as a Tibetan monk. An R2-D2 made from bamboo sticks. Now, that looks like a photograph. But this does not exist, never existed. And it's not cut and pasting things together. It's organically growing an image based on its knowledge of billions of human images that are out there. It doesn't seem to be a very long stretch to imagine the same algorithms in a couple of years generating videos on demand. Whatever you dictate, it will make you a video. It'll make you a movie. I'd like to see a movie about this. Okay, here you go. Imagine back to the VR glasses, and it generates a virtual reality for you of anything you want. Where is the ethics and the truth? There is no, as like that bamboo R2-D2, there's nothing to say that anything generated this way is actually real or true. Those articles read like a person wrote them, but the facts are not checked. So you can it makes up facts. It's just statistically generating words. We are already being surrounded by this sort of thing. But as the AI has become commonplace, we are going to be flooded with information that is not ethical or truthful. And again, we are sort of used to this. I mean, the internet is full of memes and junk and, there's a lot of misinformation flying around everywhere, but this is going to be worse. So this is the environment in which we are building education. And in particular, I think we are all very interested in here on how do we shape education towards these goals and the next set of goals beyond these. But how do we as a species make sure that we're addressing our own survival and our own improvement and not being lost in a virtual reality of distraction? So it's a very challenging problem. When I'm looking around at what's going on, you go to a typical education conference, and there's a huge floor with thousands of companies, mostly venture capital funded. These companies are all focused on making profits primarily. They are profit before purpose. And if they're focused on making profits, I don't think they're particularly focused on this problem I'm talking about, which is how do we shape our education towards sustainable development goals and like the good things. If you're focused on selling more more units, you're not necessarily focused on the purpose. So that concerns me that we are sort of building, or education is operating in a very capitalistic environment of competing products that fight for market share, and that is not helpful for us to solve these big problems. So this is the best I can come up with as a kind of alternative, and it's open education technology. Now, I'll lay it all out for you, but one of the purposes of calling it this and giving it sort of a logo is to kind of put let's say a brand over it, some sort of an understanding that certain things fit in it and certain things don't. So we had a kick-off for this concept in 2019, actually here in Barcelona, where this UNESCO conference is now, and a lot of people got together to discuss this problem and work together on defining paths towards solutions. So in that group were universities from around the world, various open source projects working in EdTech. We had researchers and other individuals who are interested. And we spent 2 days working very hard in workshops, because I whipped them like a slave driver. And we came up with a bunch of principles. and they emerged from the working groups, and I think everyone was very proud of them, that they captured the flavour of the solution. So, you know, some of them probably, in this audience, I think most of you will agree with all of them, I would say. Like, quality education is a basic human right. Open EdTech can best enable equitable access to quality education for everyone on Earth. Strongly support open standards and interoperability. Control of education technology should be collectively shared. Empower educators and learners to improve our world. Education should drive technology, not the reverse. Encourage strategic alliances and networks for those around Open EdTech. Open EdTech should be the most well-designed, competitive and sustainable technology available. So it shouldn't just be the open version, it should be the best thing. I mean, that would be ideal, right? Embrace the best of open source practices. Build on what already exists. It should be transparent about sustainability models. Very, very important. It should work closely with diverse communities to define the goals and roadmaps. It shouldn't just be one part of the world defining it for the rest, or one type of person defining it for the rest. And understanding and respecting diversity. So these were the principles that that group came up with. Now, there was a pandemic in between then and now, and things slowed down a little, but we have made progress. Here are some of the companies that already now are serving huge populations around the world in education in different ways. And these are all open source EdTech products. From them, we came up with some criteria that identify what is Open EdTech, what is a piece of open education technology. How would you say that is open education technology and something else isn't? Well, open source license. It has to support a community of open source developers. And I mean support. I don't mean putting it out on GitHub and saying, yeah, we're open source. I mean running the project, accepting changes, actually catering more to the external community developers than your own core developers in a way. Like you're there to support the community of developers. And thirdly, working openly with educators to define the roadmap. Educators are there facing the problem directly. They should be very, very active in defining the roadmap of features and things that we want. And lastly, it needs to be supported by sustainable funding models. So not grants, unless you have a lot of sources of grants and you can somehow turn that into a sustainable stream. But if you're giving money for 3 years to a project, at the end of 3 years, I have seen so many projects just, right, they just disappear, they fail, they fade away. And that's not how we should build things. We've got to build things for the long term. So, we are now coming together into an Open EdTech association based in Brussels, and the association is going to be driving things forward from here on. The association aims at these 5 SDG goals. Quality education, of course, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reducing inequalities, peace, justice, strong institutions, and partnership for the goals. I want to add, I probably could have mentioned it earlier, but quality education for me is by far the most important of all the 17. Because all the 17 require quality education. You cannot address inequality without education. You cannot address climate change without education. You need quality education. So I think probably a lot of people here would agree that the reason they're in education is they feel like it's the most important thing on earth, and I'm 100% behind that. So the core goal here of the association is to create global, open, high-quality, standardised infrastructure that's created by and available to all educators and learners. So it's very important that created by, and you saw on those principles, this is sort of boiling down those principles, but the idea here is that the education itself is empowered to create this platform for itself. So let's talk about that in more detail. We're going from a current generation Open EdTech now with a lot of software, like Moodle, but also many other things that are being used today, to a kind of a next generation Open EdTech. And there's a process that's going to take some years. The reason I'm here actually today to talk about this is because I don't want to dump on everybody a fully fledged plan. The idea here is to stimulate us to work together towards this goal. But I do have a rough plan to give you a shape. A very key component is that it needs to have standards between things. And these standards should conform to the open stand paradigm. And that was something the W3C and IEEE are very much aligned with. W3C makes most of the standards for the web that we all use. IEEE makes sure that you can take a light globe from one country and plug it into a light socket in another country and that works, as well as thousands of other things. But there are a lot of standards that run in our life all the time that we don't think about. So it's important that standards are not something just dropped on everyone. It should be built from the start as a kind of evolving standard of process. So here are the key components, and they are all joined by standards. And these components are kind of replaceable, evolvable, but these are the key functionalities that I think probably even in 50 years you would still need these things. They might look different. Instead of glasses, it might be a chip in your head. It could be clothes you wear, or it could be an actual physical robot that hangs out with you. Who knows, right? But the functions of this is going to be a little bit similar. So let me go through them. So the first part here is an Open EdTech cloud. The Open EdTech cloud is probably the easiest example I can give you is email. Does anyone here know who owns email? Who owns email, the email system? You all have an email address. You all send emails to each other. Who owns email? Yeah, no one, right? There's some standards, but everybody can make an email address. You can just add a server on the internet and, get a domain name and have an email address on it, and you can email everyone else. So that's a very early example. It's like 40 years old plus. That is a system that serves humanity today, 40 years later. So the idea of the cloud is it's a distributed, federated servers. You have servers that are sitting everywhere, and they all work together to provide a cloud for education. So this is Web3 type technologies and standards. It's built for longevity, minimizing risk. If half of those servers disappear because a lot of people switch them off, you shouldn't lose anything. You shouldn't lose a single byte of data. You shouldn't lose any functionality because it's all distributed. So it's not dependent on any specific organizations. And that's a really huge problem with a lot of EdTech today, is that they are based on some .com or some .org, which might not be here in 5 years or 10 years or 6 months. How many startups fail? How many pieces of software are lost on the internet, on SourceForge and GitHub? We need to take that risk out. And in that cloud, you want to have free, secure storage of data forever. And when I say secure, I mean it's encrypted. If you put data in there, you own it. And no one else can see it, and you can take it back out, and you decide who you share it with. And there's shared computing power in this cloud as well. So a very, very simple way of thinking about this. Imagine if every university in the world bought into this concept and dedicated one server in their own data center to this concept. And that server downloaded an operating system that was the Open EdTech operating system, and it just connected up to the rest of the cloud, and now you have thousands and thousands of machines working on a common purpose. Okay, the next thing, open education resources. Back in 2018, there was a UNESCO recommendation by every country in the world except the US at that time to move our education resources towards open education resources. And amazing, what an amazing step for the world to have that recommendation. what's happening, and I'm also a board member on Open Education Global, which is, we talk about open education resources. There are many projects happening for open education resources. Lots of people producing repositories of great information, but it's difficult to know, well, sometimes they're difficult to find. Sometimes they're difficult to know the quality and the accuracy. So remember the AI information, like even human-generated information, how accurate is it? Is it scientific? Has it been proven? Is it real? It might look good, but is it real? Is it truth? So there are ways of addressing those things with like a web of trust, right? At some point we have to trust things, and people we trust help us trust other things, right? If you're an expert in something, someone might come to you and go, well, what do you think about that other thing? And then the trust has been passed on. So there are models with cryptography, for example, that use web of trust mechanisms. And I think there's something in there that we can really use to allow quality and accurate information to float up. And that's the kind of thing we want in an open education resources repository to be available to all teachers and all students everywhere. We want to somehow float up that good stuff. I also think there should be many SDG projects, and there is funding for people to develop OERs for SDGs, that would be designed to go into this database, and we would develop it with an eye to make it available to the world this way. And then there's curriculums, different pathways, how do you attain competency in anything, and how do you get there? And this needs to be usable by all, available to all. So our just as a quick plug, our MoodleNet project is, a very small percentage of this, but that's the kind of area where MoodleNet is addressing. But I think there's a long way to go, and we all need to work on that. So the third part is the educator classroom. And this may be a little controversial, but perhaps not. I hope you understand my reasoning. I would love to see a trend towards teachers owning their own classroom, even if they work in an institution. Currently the trend is that an institution sets up the online classrooms for all the educators there, and it's owned by the institution, and the course is owned by the institution, and it's very much a mark of pride that the institution owns it. But I think if you look at how informal teaching works in the world, look at the YouTube creators, so many people are independent teachers, that ability to own your space and kind of develop as a teacher, become a real guru in that subject, to actually progress to becoming a real expert, bring many students along on your learning journey over 20 years. Those are the kind of teachers I think we all want to see in higher education. We want to see these real people who are expert in things. So it's important for me, I think, that, it's my proposition, that we focus on a teacher-centered classroom. If you're going to have teachers teaching things, let them own the space. And this would be sitting in the cloud, and it would be lifelong, and they would be building it out. Currently, this already happens in a way. What do teachers do? They develop PowerPoint slides and PDFs, and they store it on their hard drive on their laptop, right? And then they upload it into things. But what if there was a custom space for that? Now, in there, you would have AI, but the AI would be assisting you, like an assistant, to be a creative teacher, to handle 5 students or 10 students or 1 million students. It would be assisting you, but I'm really a strong proponent of keeping human beings in the driver's seat. I don't think we should be thinking about replacing education with AI. And why? What is humanity, right? We all have a limited lifespan. Education is us passing on humanity to the next generation. Why would we take humans out of the loop of that, right? It seems to me I'm very much a proponent of keeping humans in the driver's seat, but AI can help. So In that space, you would have a lot of other tools. You'd have, video conferencing, and you'd have quizzes and assignments, and all those sort of tools would be connected in there. And you've got all that Lego box of tools to create whatever experiences you want for your students. This space would connect to, for each student, they would have a learner dashboard. And what is the learner space? Well, this picture shows some roads because for a learner, like those skill trees on games, you as a person have a lot of paths you can take in life. So this would be a tool that you would get, early age probably, and it would store information about what you've learned, all your verifiable credentials would come back to there. So if you take a degree, would come back into this space. You would have that kind of web of trust. If you get a credential from a place, the validity of that place needs to be trusted, right? I've got a degree from Harvard, says my certificate, and someone goes, yeah, I like Harvard, that's a really reputable organisation. Oh no, I mean, Harvard College somewhere in, some other country. It's not the Harvard you're thinking of. So, we need this sort of verification of the verifiers as well. This tool would help you choose pathways. There would be an intelligent agent in there, or AI as well, assisting you with making those life decisions about where you're going to go. Where do you want to get to? And you say, okay, this is my goal. I want to get here. And the tool goes, well, there's education available locally here. You can go online to this course over here. There's certifications here. It gets you there. And not only that, it uses all these wearables to prompt you. So it fits in with your life. We all learn in little moments. So, you've got 5 minutes, you're on a bus or something, and your watch goes, or, your VR glasses sort of say, oh, now's time to just look at this. Insisting you, it's fitting in with your life. So this learner tool, I believe this really needs to exist. And it connects with the classroom. So with the classroom, data would come from your learner tool into the classroom tool and back over standards. The last piece is organisation environments. So the two main types I want to talk about here, the education institution. So I've already sort of said, these teacher rooms, they connect to your education institution, but also to a workplace as well. There's a lot of learning in workplaces. The organisation owns this space, and what that space does is manages learners. So imagine somebody leaves their job in a company, and the company now has to decide, okay, how are we going to fill this position? And maybe there's someone else at the company who has 80% of those skills and has indicated that they want to go in that direction. Okay, well, let's help them with the last 20% of skills and get them there. Or maybe there isn't anyone internally, so let's look externally. Let's recruit somebody. And that recruitment process could connect to these learner spaces, which are saying, the learner said, yeah, I'm looking for a job, and here are my skills, and it makes itself available for search. So if you look at how we do that now, we use things like LinkedIn, where you type a bunch of stuff, and it's not usually true, or exactly true, and there's no way to check if it's true, and this would be a way where you would be able to check. You'd say, look, I want someone who has these skills, and it would be all verified right back to the source. So that, I think, is a picture that doesn't really have really hard dependency on anything we have now, but I feel like it's a complete picture that sort of brings everything that lots of people are talking about together. And I would call that Open EdTech, and I would want us to build it with those Open EdTech criteria. So what we're doing now at Open EdTech is we're starting to connect like-minded people for each of these projects into research groups to work on the problem, to define them more deeply and prove them or disprove them or modify them, but actually to push this forward. There'll be key integration projects between existing software as well, and thinking about how we connect the funding into Open EdTech. And I have a number of models of sustainability. So, you know, I talked about Moodle before. It's free software. We give it away, but somehow Moodle is paying 160 people to work on it on a daily basis. And that's because we have a whole lot of very stable sustainability models that we've built into the business model. And the last thing is the education process of this itself. How do we educate people that the need for Open EdTech rather than just buying product X from off the shelf? To understand the reasons for it, the long-term reasons. And that's one reason I'm here today, for example. So if you're interested, there is a little website here, openedtech.global, and there is a form where you can express some interest, and I will get you connected up. And I would just say, I think we, as human beings, we really need to fight to keep education technology open. It's the only way that the good can truly surface, and we don't go off down other roads. So thank you very much for listening. Real pleasure to be here. If you need to contact me, here they are. Just reach out anytime. All right. Thank you.
I hope we have some time for questions, because I have 15 to 20. And
Okay.
we'll go over time if that's okay for you. No, we won't have to go through them all. But if you do need to run, we understand there are other events going on. But we did intend to go over a little bit, because we knew that this was going to be an intensive talk. So thank you for taking the time to lay this out in front of us, because I think it's a real important contribution. And the global public good, the discussion that we're trying to have about what we can do different, what we can do to transform higher education in this space. And Moodle is already integrated in so many institutions worldwide, as you saw. Before I go into other thoughts and questions, anything that comes to mind that resonates, questions from the audience, things that you wanted to raise? Sure. Dr. Juliet?
Thank you. Fantastic. I'm very much interested in that website where AI produces articles.
Right? Well, it's called Write Sonic.
No, I'm going to tell you why, because this is a tradition in higher education that we ask students to write articles at the end of the term. And I can tell you 100% for it, rather than asking them to sit down, memorize something, and then come to class, have an exam. I think the other one, because there's a research going behind it, is much more of a learning process rather than one exam for which they memorize. But if now, as you said, there is this availability of a place that they can write using AI, exactly. The question is then, how are we going to assess? And this is my question, actually. So can this AI also have references or include, for example, quote someone or cite someone saying this person said that, and then add the reference at the end? Is that a possibility?
Look, as impressive as that looked, it's the very beginning of what's possible. It's honestly the exponential growth of this field just in the last 1 and 2 years is it's exponential, and it's developing very quickly. And I'm not even sure. Yeah, with the referencing, you mean to like fake it better with references? Right now, no, I don't think so. But I would see that as coming quite soon if you wanted that. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's a matter of doing some searches and matching, and that's things that computers are good at. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Martin, we need to talk about this later.
Yeah.
Please.
I know.
For me, it's powerful also because you've seen this transformation. I feel like you've been invested and you've seen this coming for some time. Can you tell us, I know you didn't go in a lot of your background and the transformations that you've seen, but would you want to elaborate on, are we the raccoons in the computer programming class just kind of going along with the flow? When I saw that, I was a little scared. I was like, we're actually just going along with the flow and slowly failing. Yeah. But you must have seen this, and you must have seen it in the data and in different contexts. I'm just curious if you want to share.
It's why I chose that example, actually, to capture that feeling, because I feel like, yes, a lot of us are just, the technology is running rampant, and we're just catching up, getting the next model of this and choosing from a shelf of that. So, Yeah, I grew up in central Australia, very isolated. There was no schools, and I had to do my school online. So until I was 12 or so, I did school on shortwave radio. I was doing distance education. So I'm very, very used to that mode. And then I worked at a university, and that's where I started developing Moodle in the late 90s. And I'm very much keeping in touch with computer science the whole time,
right.
and just watching the trends and sort of waiting for things. And I have a huge interest in science fiction since I was a boy. And, you know, a lot of things in science fiction from decades ago have been surpassed already. Some haven't come true yet, but looks like they will. It's like it's always surprising. But this area in particular, yeah, we are really finding out how to duplicate the thing that we're educating,
right,
bit by bit.
That's powerful. How we use these tools, how we, lose to these tools. Questions from the audience and your reflections? I mean, does this resonate? Yes, here in the front. Just let me grab a mic just for the recording and the audience online. Thank you very much, ma'am.
I'm Dalia Youssef. I'm the director of the Central E-Learning Unit from Ain Shams University, Egypt. So we use Moodle for the past 15 years. We train educators how to use Moodle. We orient students how to use Moodle. It's growing fast and it's changing a lot. What's before the pandemic is not what's now. So we are now facing a challenge. The challenge is not in the students, the challenge is in the educators. As she asked, how we can assess students right now. We should change our mindset. We should assess students on something else, not assignments. We should assess students on we should use AI in assessing students also, but not in the same old method and traditional method. So what's very important that you said is the conversation between educators and developers and programmers, because this conversation is what drives the education technology. So to maintain the research, to maintain the conversation, I think this is very important in this time. Thank you so much.
I have a couple of comments on that standard things that I've really come to believe over time. One is the very best teaching situation that exists is one-on-one. If you have a mentor and you're working with a mentor, you can't cheat that person, right? They know you. But they could predict what you're going to get on a test because they know you so well. And that's like the ideal. So anytime we add more people, we're moving away from the ideal. So the first thing is good quality education. Generally, you need smaller classes. Sorry, you need fewer people and smaller classes. So yeah, teaching to 1 million is not going to be so great, even with AI. And the second thing is that what's key in a mentor relationship is the constant engagement. So I've often said it's a problem for the last 20 years. Even assignments aren't that great because it's usually one big lump. And maybe in a 16-week course, you have 2 or 3 big lumps. Well, we were all students. We know how well we crammed at the last minute to get something done. Like, it's a very different situation from being assessed every day, 1% every day. And if you have that constant engagement, it's very hard to cheat. Yeah. So there wouldn't be a need for plagiarism detection and all that if we worked with that kind of constant engagement model. Yeah.
Great. Another question in the front?
Hi, I just wanted to build on something that you said as well about having those conversations with the programmers and the educators, and I see OET playing a vital role in that because for twofold reasons. One of the reasons, because those conversations are not being happened, or not happening, that people don't even know what maybe open source software is. I think a lot of people are still sort of, yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't understand what it really means. That's one. And secondly, because of that, the word open has been hijacked by so many other organizations. And I think that's a real problem that OET could address. So I just wanted to hear your comments on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, open, that's a good one because sometimes we say faux-pen, like the French faux, which is not really open. So open source, the reason why that's very, very important is because when done properly, it allows a very deep engagement between developers. And in the Moodle case, where we have many thousands of institutions contributing to Moodle, those contributions are usually a smallish thing, you know, an idea, you know, here's a new way to do quizzes that an educator has worked with a developer locally in their institution, and they've got a dream, right? Oh, if I could just do quizzes this way. And they'll work with the developer locally and they'll test it and they'll have a nice little tight cycle of development and they'll come up with a prototype and they can test it on their students. In fact, the very first version of Moodle I developed that way at my university. I had a class I was teaching and I would update Moodle every night in response to what was happening the previous day. And I had a very tight development cycle and I was making it better and better as the educator. But in many universities, that's happening. And then it turns into something very useful for them. And then they share it back to the community. And sometimes these things take off like wildfire and then we put them in the main product for everybody. And sometimes they're a bit niche and it's only a certain type of education institution that needs them and they stay in our plugins database where anybody can get them and add them. But that's true open source development where you've got that engagement and that's, you know, that's collaboration. That's everyone in partnership on the same tool together. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
I think so too. And then come back to this and another question in the back. Thank you.
My name is Lacey Barnes, and I am an affiliate of AFT, which is American Federation of Teachers. My question is, how are you dealing with the diversity of students from, you know, the visual learner, the auditory learner? How will this interface with that diversity?
You mean how it's happening now or how should it happen in the future? My thoughts on how it should happen. So there is a lot of research around that and I've seen some of it. I know the concept of learning styles has been more or less debunked because actually what we should be doing is providing all of those at once all the time anyway. Because maybe this day you feel like reading something and the next day you feel like listening to something. And we all shift. And so it's kind of about accessibility to provide things in its multiple modes. So that's that. But it is very important to provide that accessibility. I mean, as the keynote said this morning, you know, not leaving anyone behind is essential. And that's on every level, in every possible way we define that. So that's very important. The nice thing about electric digital infrastructure is it is so malleable and you can convert things into other things. You can take a representation and convert it into another representation. A computer can read a document to you. You can, you know, maybe pipe an essay into this AI and it will generate a movie for you probably in future. So, you know, I think getting into digital is definitely a very good step. I don't think anyone would argue that. It's, it's a bit like how electric cars are a good idea because electric infrastructure is just kind of everywhere and it means you can plug your car in on any socket and, you know, rather than hydrogen or something is less malleable. But yes, I think thinking digital is definitely what we need to be doing for those reasons. Yeah.
We are coming to time, ladies and gentlemen, and I feel like we should continue in many more HED talks because this is wonderful. And I'd want to finish, if that's possible.
Open EdTech is the place to continue.
There you go. And that's kind of the right spirit. And I'm curious if you want to focus on that in your vision or Moodle within EdTech. Because I feel like a vision for Moodle, I'd love to hear more about. Like, where do you see Moodle going in the context of Open EdTech? Because, yeah, you know, it's a responsibility almost with this many institutions, this many countries involved. We're grateful that you take that responsibility so seriously, but I'd love to hear more if you want to finish on that.
So, like we're good friends with edX, for example, right? So it's in the open source world, there's not this competitiveness that you might see in other zones. What we will certainly be doing at Moodle is working on a Moodle next gen that plugs into this. And obviously the first target will be the classroom space that I talked about. So helping to define a version of Moodle that fits into that classroom space but exists on this Open EdTech cloud, that connects to everything the same. But it's a truly open environment. So if someone else comes, say edX, come up with their version of a classroom that fits into that same space, but has all the same APIs, data comes into it the same way, comes out of it the same way, then we still have some pluggability. We still have some way to plug in things or have technology evolve. And that's important, right? It's not, we can't build one thing for the next 100 years. It's got to be built to evolve. So yeah, that's, so we'll definitely be focusing on the classroom space. We have various projects that are addressing some of the other spaces. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. But I'm looking for collaboration here, and that's the spirit.
Brilliant. We're glad you're here with us. Thanks again. A big round of applause for Martin Dugiamas.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying on. We wanted to go a little bit over time because I think you wanted to unpack a little bit, but I thought it was incredibly worthwhile.
Thank you. Really appreciated the questions there too.